Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Now, are you or someone close to you own a Canadian business and are considering relocating or expanding your operations into the United States? Well, if that's on your radar, you will not want to miss this week's episode. Our topic, the three questions Canadian business owners should ask before shifting their operations to the U.S. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode of the Three Questions Podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. Canadian businesses are increasingly eyeing the United States relocation in 2025, primarily due to escalating tariffs from the Canada-U.S. trade war that were initiated by President Trump's proposed increased tariffs on Canadian imports. That would potentially add billions in expenses for sectors like the automotive industry, steel, and energy. Shifting business to the United States comes with challenges like unfamiliar regulations, relocation costs, and the potential for reverse effects from Canadian countermeasures. Now, while tariffs are a key relocation driver, there are attractive incentives to consider. And I'd add to that list a larger U.S. market by far, lower corporate taxes, skilled labor pools, especially in tech and manufacturing hubs, and there are incentives like opportunity zones or state subsidies. Joining us today from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to help us navigate the three questions Canadian business owners should ask before shifting their operations to the United States is Michael Neeson. Michael is a partner with Dixon Wright, and Michael specializes in real estate and business law with a focus on cross-border transaction and international client. Who better to have as a guest? With his extensive experience in representing entrepreneurs in mergers and acquisitions, operational disputes, Michael is a perfect guide for navigating U.S. business shifts. And so, Michael, we finally made this happen. Thank you for making time for us to be here on the podcast today.
Wayne, it's a pleasure. Thank you and your team for having me. It's an honor.
Now, well, before we dive into the three questions, I think it would be a good idea if you could share just for the audience, because again, we have listeners across the United States, across Canada. If you could share a little bit about your work with Canadian clients at your law firm and why this U.S.-Canada trade war is pushing more businesses like the automotive suppliers to consider U.S. operations.
Of course. I mean, we have two offices in Canada, Windsor and Toronto. So this is a daily task for us. And the answer to your question, Wayne, it's the bottom line. There's import tariffs at certain rates, especially with Canada, especially in the automotive industry for car parts. Okay, a lot of car parts are manufactured outside the US. When they come into the US, they are taxed at a certain rate. Canada is not the only one, Germany another. So if operations are shifted to the US, the bottom line for businesses is higher because they don't have to pay a significant tariff for the parts coming in. That's pretty much what I see. So essentially, operations and management and bottom line numbers, very, very important to businesses in Canada.
Okay, we're going to be discussing the three questions Canadian business owners should ask before shifting their operations to the US. Michael, let's get right to our questions. No reason to delay. I think we got the idea. So here we go. Question number one. I've been an automotive parts supplier for the past 15 years. My business is located just west of Toronto in Mississauga, Ontario. Given all the issues due to the trade war between Canada and the US, I am considering moving my business operations into the US. Now, I'm looking for the path of least resistance. What is more advantageous, opening a new business or by acquisition? Michael,
Oh,
take it away.
of course, Wayne. The lawyerly answer, as a lot of listeners may
It
hear, is it
depends.
depends. There we go. Okay.
I've been
So
trained. I've
me,
been
me,
trained.
exactly. Me having a background in economics and finance, you have to run the financial model. I work with my business owner, entrepreneur clients and their team, their CFO, their finance department, and their outsourced or the outsourced CFO or any interim CFO. We have to run the financial models of what works. Essentially, it goes back to the bottom line number. Now, we mentioned earlier there's a lot of incentives. One recent bill that was passed in the United States, the big, beautiful tax bill. I'm
One big
sure
beautiful bill.
Canadian. So that attracts business owners. One big highlight of that bill is the Section 179 and the bonus depreciation that business owners can take in the first year of purchasing equipment, machinery for the use of their business. Okay, this is huge. That goes to your first question. Acquisition or shifting operations, moving the entire operations. So when these financial models are run, acquisition may be better. Okay. Now, a lot of business owners think it's very simple. I'm just going to buy this business. As lawyers, we need to take a step back and understand what kind of acquisition is it? Is it a stock purchase, like a share purchase, or is it an asset purchase? Both are equally attractive, but both have different tax ramifications for the buyer. Okay. For example, if it's an asset purchase, the buyer buys certain equipment, machinery, inventory. A lot of those items can be depreciated in the first year. Huge tax advantage for the buyer in the first year. So the acquisition might be the better route. Okay. Opening a new business, there are hurdles. Okay. Compliance from an operational perspective, compliance from an employment perspective, and of course, real estate. Either you acquire the building or you lease the building. So various financial models have to run, and a lot of diligence have to be done.
Well, the first thing I would note is that just like in my business, you're doing some kind of forecasting, which in my practice area is essential when client comes to me and say, I'm planning a move from Canada to the US, I'm looking at the personal level, not necessarily a business, but as a person, you know, once you get beyond the obvious of getting immigration figured out, you
Of
and
course.
and then you get into tax planning and then wealth management. So what's this going to look like? So that, I always tell every client that, we have to do a capital forecast at the beginning of this exercise, not later on down the road. So it's not much different than, maybe different metrics, but the principle is still the same. You measure twice, cut once, basically is the principle. So
Of course.
the
Of course.
analysis that you do at the front end is super important, which makes perfect sense to me. And you get into the minutia, I would say, let's just say acquisition emerges as the preferred path for this client. What key due diligence steps should the owner take just to minimize disruptions? Because if they're making this transition, there's going to be disruptions. So what kind of things would you recommend that, in terms of due diligence, should they be making in that case?
So immediately you have to have the right team around you to assist you in the transition process with respect to the diligence and everything connected to it. I do a lot of international M&A, and we break it down into four categories. We have operations, we have employment, we have the real estate component, and of course the bottom line ownership going up to the ultimate beneficial owner. Okay, so we have to do diligence on the operations. We have to do diligence on all the other categories. What is important? Okay, itemizing uh, tax, itemizing compliance, itemizing what we do is we create a checklist, itemizing what is needed from an operational perspective to either shift the workforce or obtain a new workforce in the United States. Okay, you indicated that it would be an acquisition if that's the front runner here. So are you going to hire new employees, or are you going to ask your existing employees to move to the United States? So
That
that
becomes a
is the
major
employment.
heavy load if you're hiring, bringing your team with you.
So that exactly. So if there are key employees that have been loyal to you and your company, okay, and you're shifting operations because it affects your bottom line, which is a business decision, which is perfectly normal. How do you reward your key employees that have been with you in this example for the past 15 years? If their family is in Ontario and you need to open up, for example, in Fort Lauderdale, what are you going to do? So are you going to ask them to move? What kind of packages are you going to provide to them? If you're not, then you need to hire a new workforce. So
It could be
there's a
Fort
lot of,
Lauderdale. It could even be like Dayton, Ohio, or so anywhere in
well, yeah,
between.
exactly. So you want to
Your old
obviously
state
go
in
to,
Illinois. I mean, it could be anywhere.
well, the reason I chose Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Wayne, just for our listeners here, there's no state income tax in Florida,
That
just
would be
letting you.
attractive.
So just one of the attractive states, like Texas is another one. So Ohio, not really sure, but Florida is a very so it's a checklist from an operational due diligence perspective, a legal due diligence perspective, and what I mentioned earlier, we work heavily with the finance team. So essentially, we need to work with them and do a financial model, like you said, a capital projection on what works. So a lot of interaction, a lot of conversation.
Our topic today is the three questions Canadian business owners should ask before shifting their operations to the U.S. And joining us from beautiful Fort Lauderdale, Florida, is Michael Neeson. Michael is a partner with Dixon Wright, and Michael specializes in real estate and business law, and he focuses on cross-border transactions and international clients. So again, for our topic today, Michael's the guy. I'm really glad you're able to make time for us, Michael. Let's move on to question two. And the way these questions are today are basically from the perspective of one business owner in Mississauga, Ontario, which is just for those who are not familiar, it's just west of Toronto. Business owner looking to consider a relocation of his business from Canada to the US. So, question number two, as a follow up to my first question, what are the tax implications I need to consider if I open a new business or acquire an existing operation? Michael, take it away.
Oh, when tax, as much as I love it, I hate it at the same time. That's why I work closely with
And
our tax attorneys. So there's the higher level tax attorneys that look at it from a macro perspective, and then there's the ones that read and memorize the Internal Revenue Service code and can pinpoint the line items, and those are the micro level tax attorneys. So I have to work with both. Okay, so you indicated opening up a new business or acquiring existing operation, two different worlds, two different benefits, but also two different detriments from a financial perspective. New business can be formed. You have to address tax implications. Like you said, can it be taxed as a C Corp? C Corp is taxed on two levels. Can it be taxed as an S Corp? S Corp flows through to the primary owners of that business. That's taxed at a single level. So would you rather be taxed as a single at a single level or a dual level? Depending on your business, one could be more attractive than the other. Okay. If you're doing an existing operation, you have to look at the existing company, the operating entity, and how it is taxed. Okay. And if you are acquiring an existing operation, the type of structure you have legally will indicate and affect your tax implications. I mentioned earlier you can acquire a business via an asset purchase. This is where you pick and choose what items you buy from a business: equipment, machinery, accounts receivable,
real estate,
inventory, real estate. Exactly. So you pick and choose what you buy. Very attractive for buyers because minimizing liability is key with an asset purchase, which is very important to buyers. On the contrary, you can have a stock purchase. A stock purchase is literally where you have an owner of a company. That owner has certain shares, let's say 100 shares. One owner steps out of the shoes as the owner, and the buyer steps in the shoes of that owner, acquiring the business. And that is called a stock purchase. It's very attractive to sellers because it minimizes their risk. Not so attractive to buyers because they can't really pick and choose the assets and
they're
liabilities
taking
that they can.
everything, lock,
It's
stock, and
literally
barrel.
anything and everything, known and unknown, but it could have certain tax advantages. And let me add operational advantages. If there are certain key contracts that are in place, for example, government contracts or very key contracts with suppliers or vendors. Uh, those and those have to be assigned with an asset purchase and don't have to be assigned with a stock purchase. So to avoid going to all those vendors, suppliers, and other partners, you want to do a stock purchase. Everything is in place, customer and partner and vendor facing. Internally, of course, there's a change, but customer, vendor, supplier facing, it's the same company. There you go.
Well, you've opened the Pandora's box here in terms of me with, I thought I had one question, but I have multiple now. It's all on you, Michael. It's your fault. I got more
Of
questions
course.
now.
It's,
So first one I want to ask is just high level, how do the US tax benefits, ongoing compare to Canada's tax rates? So you're a Canadian business owner.
mhm.
Uh, are there cross-border strategies? And I think of like transfer pricing. We've had a guy on before. We had a guest on. We talked about transfer pricing to mitigate the potential for double taxation for relocating a business. And I have another one that just came up to me while you were talking. It's real estate related. So you know how
Mhm.
we were talking about cost segregation earlier, about the
Yeah,
idea of being able
yeah.
to get deductions, and we had Joel Dolburn on, who's an expert in that space, was like the happiest guy in the world, come on my podcast, and he was like, I thought he was going to start crying. He was delighted that we have the one big beautiful bill. So here's a question on to that end. If I'm a business owner and I take over a business, do I get any cost segregation benefits if the building has already been gone through a cost segregation, or is that one and done? Or like, does a new business owner get the benefit of cost segregation? I'm just more throwing mud up against the wall on that one, but if you have a comment on it, great. If you don't, we can just
No, I
stick with.
do. So I'm actually evaluating. We did not prepare this just for
I was
everybody's.
100%.
Yeah, so I actually have a case right now. It is a company in Ontario, and I'm working with our Toronto, Ontario partners, looking to acquire a business in near Fort Myers. It's on the
Yep.
west side of the state of Florida.
The golf side.
Operation, it's Gulf side, exactly. Thank you. It's manufacturing. So they have a lot of contracts, they have inventory, a lot of machinery, and of course, real estate. Okay, real estate, the cost segregation that you mentioned, very important. So the real estate in this case is owned by the same entity that owns the operating business. Traditionally, that's not how you do it. You have
Hmm.
your operating entity owned by one holding company, and you have your real estate owned by a different real estate holding company, and one leases from the other, okay, to avoid liability, to compartmentalize everything. In this case, it's the same. So we are doing an analysis of whether for the Canadian client, is it better for them to, if they acquire the stock in this entity, literally the real estate goes along with the company. We don't need to do a deed. There's no transfer taxes. Uh, and it's like the property, we don't have to pull title or do any survey or any diligence because
It's part of the overall purchase.
exactly. Uh, on the other hand, is it more advantageous for restructuring the seller, them deeding, transferring the real estate to a holding company, and then our client from Toronto buying the real estate as an asset?
Hmm.
Okay. So if it's a stock purchase, they do get the benefit of the cost segregation study because it's in the name of the business. We're not
Even if
changing
it had
anything.
gone through a cost segregation exercise prior to that, it was
Correct.
fascinating.
So, but if they do it the other way, it's a brand new entity. They have to form a new co, and it's like we're just starting the process all over again.
Hmm.
Very
Interesting.
interesting fact. Very interesting point. And I had to kind of dig deeper in that one. And
Well,
Florida,
I knew this was going to happen.
y- yeah,
Uh,
that's okay.
So,
But this
so
is
going back to the initial question about just the idea of, taxation in Canada versus taxation in the US. So when you have a client like the client you're talking to now, or the one in this case, and they're saying, well, how do these ongoing tax benefits in the US compared to what you're dealing with in Canada? My default is that the US wins in like laps the field. Am I right? Or is it
You're right.
close?
No, you're right. You're right. And with the big, beautiful tax bill benefiting a lot of small to medium-sized business, like I mentioned earlier, there's so many incentives. There's a lot of incentives as long as you understand the code and you follow it. I mean, there's certain black and white answers and there's certain gray type of areas. So as long as you have that strong financial and that CPA on your side, of course, America provides a lot of tax advantages as compared to Canada.
Okay, I'm going to throw one more at you, and
You
when
got
I
it.
come back down to Fort Lauderdale in a couple of weeks, you can take me into your office and put me in a headlock for throwing you under the bus here. But such is life. I'll try to defend myself here. So, um, opportunity zones. How often are Canadian business owners or foreign business owners moving, setting up operations in the US to take advantage of opportunities? Is that common, or is it simply something that US businesses take advantage of?
Just to my knowledge, I'm working on a new one right now. I think it's educating the Canadians on these opportunities because they are
For the
specific
folks listening, and
areas.
maybe you could give everybody kind of a high level, what is an opportunity zone? Because we may be talking, in a foreign
Oh,
language.
opportunity. So a qualified opportunity zone, it's dedicated land in a county or a state that allows for certain tax advantages if you fulfill certain requirements of this opportunity zone. One of the biggest requirements is, and one of the biggest advantages is, if you buy the land, develop it, residential, mixed use, commercial and hold it for 10 years and you sell this property after 10 years, you are not subject to tax. Obviously, you just got to follow certain requirements, but that is the biggest
When you
advantage.
say tax, you
Uh,
mean capital gains on the,
any capital gain, you're excluded from any capital gain if you buy land in a certain opportunity zone. And you can look this up in each state and county. Very, very popular. You develop it, you follow those certain requirements. Again, nothing crazy, nothing out of customary, but you have to follow the rules. And holding period is 10 years. You sell, you are excluded from any capital gain tax. And I think that is the biggest advantage. The disadvantage, Wayne, is holding for 10 years and investing money and having the operational costs. So a lot of Canadians may not know this because it's very, very uh, uh, fact specific. It's very, very area specific, and IRS code very, very strong on it. So I feel that a lot of Canadians may not be educated enough on it
that's
if
the
they are
benefit of
exposed.
having you
Yeah,
acting as an advocate
yeah.
here. Okay, we got one more question. Question number three. Last but not least, what are the compliance requirements in regard to hiring employees? I knew we were going to get to this, so take it away.
Oh, of course. So employment force, we talked about this earlier. Very important in your operations, especially the key employees. That is a big value, a big portion of the value in the entire business. If you're going to be going to market and going to market with private equity or a private buyer, workforce is extremely important. So, what are the diligence requirements? What do you have to do? What are the compliance requirements? In the United States, there's two facets. You have the federal level, which is the Internal Revenue Service, Department of Labor. But each state, very similar to Canada, each province has its own rules and regulations and compliance requirements. So while at the federal level, you have to make sure that they're either a citizen or have permanent residency or a green card, you have to fill out what's called a W-9 and W-4 to make sure that the employee doesn't cause you any issues, and that is for the employer's file. And when you do payroll, you submit that to the IRS and the U.S. Department of Immigration and other federal agencies. But each state, like Canada, like each province, has its own compliance requirements.
Do
So,
they
for
ever?
example, I'll use Florida in Illinois because I'm licensed in both states, both jurisdictions. So, for example, Florida, as I indicated earlier, has no state income tax. Okay. So that is very attractive for a lot of employers to set up operations in Florida, but the workforce may not be as good as the one in Chicago. Okay. In the Chicagoland area in Illinois, Illinois has a state income tax of 4.875 or 4.9%. So, but each state, like I said earlier, has their own state-specific compliance requirements that has to do with onboarding, paying the unemployment tax, making sure all documents are in order for your employees. I had a client in Indiana, very similar laws to Illinois, in the construction space. Okay. A lot of the workers were undocumented. And working with them, we had to set up a structure and a plan of action to make sure that they were compliant in the event of an audit by any of the federal or state agencies. So, what did that entail? That entailed collecting all the documents from each employee, uh, updating the records internally, and making sure that whether they're documented or not, that they are somehow tied to the organization, but that the organization is not liable for their, uh, how do I say it, not having the proper documentation.
Immigration status.
Immigration status, you can call it documentation, but we just wanted to make sure that there was no liability. So working with immigration attorneys, working with the HR team, extremely important. And as you probably may know, Wayne, documents and having record keeping is extremely important. So we always say have everything on file, digitally preferably, but if you're old school, keep everything in your file cabinet.
So if you're a Canadian business owner, you're shifting to the US. What, and again, I'm again throwing you clearly right under the bus.
Yeah.
It's the fun part of this show today. Uh, so labor laws in the US. If you, and based on your experience of working with Canadian, what have you seen as the sort of difference between US labor laws and Canada? Have you noticed anything yourself as in terms of ruling? I have a couple observations, but I wonder what you've seen is a difference in labor laws, federal, state versus what you see in Canada. And are there any steps that owners should take to smooth hiring while, avoiding penalties, specifically if you're in a tariff impacted industry? So any
Uh,
thoughts on that?
I guess I would say it depends what sector, the industry sector the employer's in. So, for example, there are certain there were certain tax advantages in the energy sector. They're not like they were before, but they're still available. So if your employment, if your workforce is in the energy sector, there was again a lot of availability for incentives. There still are, but not as good as before. So I've seen just a lot of companies, not just Canada, but also from overseas, as I'm Russian speaking, take advantage of those industry sectors like technology and manufacturing, for example, in certain cities, and utilize the local workforce. The problem is, Wayne, as you know, so if the workforce is documented, have immigration status, they're more expensive. If they're not documented, they're less expensive. So that goes to what I said earlier. It depends on the industry that we're talking about.
Well, I got
What are
one.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I got one. And again, this is based on past experience of when I was an employer in Canada. So if the rules have changed from then until now, mea culpa.
Hmm.
But based on what I've seen, and this might be hard for you to believe, I think severance, if you sever somebody in Canada, the obligation of the employer to compensate the employee can be a bit more onerous in Canada than it is in the US. So
That's a big difference.
for
That is a big difference.
long-term employee long-term employees in Canada, and again, I'm going back years here. So if there's an employment attorney listening to this podcast, if you want to chime in and let me know that I'm completely off base, I'm humility is accepting my limitations here. But yeah, in the past, if you let somebody go, especially older employees, so let's just say hypothetically speaking, you hired two people on the same day for the same job and one of them was 10 years older than the other, you kept them for the same time amount of time and let them go on the same day. The older client you would have to pay the older employee a longer severance than the younger one. That's the way it was. That's an example. So you hire two people, same job, keep them for the exact same amount of time. The person closer to retirement age is going to likely receive a larger severance than the person that's further away from retirement age.
That is a great point. I know for a fact in Ontario, the
And that's
separation.
where I experienced that, by the
Yeah,
way,
yeah, and
personally.
that, no, I agree. I mean, the
Sadly.
separation formalities in Ontario for any type of employee is at a much higher level than it is in the United States, even if they don't have a contract. In the United States, what we have is at will
I was
employment,
just going to say you have at will. Everybody's at
which
will.
means the employer can lay off or eliminate the position of the employee at any time for any reason, which also and mirror like the employee can resign or quit at any time for any reason. That is an at-will relationship, okay? So contractually, the employee is technically not entitled to any severance, like you mentioned earlier. On the contrary, we have employment agreement relationships which tends to go into the executive level or management level employees that have maybe some profit sharing or other compensation benefits from the employer. But those are contractual, and we pre-negotiate the severance at the time of negotiating that agreement. So the employer and employee kind of know before finalizing that
What's the
contract
deal? There's no real negotiation at the end
what
of the day.
what I mean the issue is in the United States it's a lot easier to sue somebody for anything. You can do it pro se. You can walk in the courthouse and file a pro se action or get a lawyer. There's a lot of employment lawyers, no offense to anybody listening, that would love to get a group of employees that were underpaid and do a mini class action against an employer for wage and hour or some other violation of statutes in a state or on the federal level because the damages are statutory. They're written in writing what the damages are, and traditionally attorneys' fees are guaranteed pursuant to statutes. So that's why lawyers love those kinds of cases. But again, law companies don't like lawsuits. So if somebody does get laid off and for some reason, and it does happen, they get laid off for discriminatory reasons, like you mentioned earlier, that would be a viable action.
Yeah, I guess the one I was thinking about while you're talking at the state level, of course, is here in California with the Dynamex
Oh yeah.
case. That one where basically they almost eliminated, not entirely, but the idea of being a self-employed contractor in California has kind of gone the way of the dodo bird. And there's this ABC test that has to be passed, and basically now, if you're working for anybody, you're supposedly an employee, and the employer has some serious obligations. So it's a little different
Yeah.
world.
Of course, and one item just because I just thought of it, which ties into our questions earlier of either opening up shop or acquiring an existing operation is if the employees are here and you're acquiring them, are they the misclassification between independent contractors and employees
Mhm.
is extremely important, very similar to exactly what you just said, because if you acquire a business and they're all classified as ICs, and that's a misclassification, you're on the hook for all those penalties and past interest and unemployment taxes that were not paid. But if you have to acquire the business and their employees, the purchase price will be a lot higher.
Okay, from your experience, okay, so you have a lot of experience working with cross-border clients. You've actually, rhymed off a few examples here. Uh, so Canada and the United States is in a bit of a trade dispute right now. We'd all recognize that. So for Canadian business owners looking to make this relocation, what is one underrated risk that they better not overlook if they're shifting to the US? And is there a way to practically address it in advance?
I think a lot of Canadians may have this misconception that the U.S. Is a great area. It is, but as if you're a business owner, if you're an entrepreneur, and you grew your business from the beginning, that is your baby. You owe it to your baby to do a full, thorough diligence of the location of where you want to move. Okay, so I'd say the un most underrated risk is moving too fast and then fixing everything later, okay? Without taking a step back, having the right team around you. When I say the right team, okay, you need your company middle market professionals, you need your accountant, you need your attorney, you need on the personal level, you need a financial wealth advisor because if you're a sole business owner or your family is the owner, it's going to affect the bottom line. Okay. It will ultimately affect you. So to have the right professionals at that table, extremely, extremely important. And of course, if you're going to be borrowing money, you want to address interest rates. They're pretty high right now. So I think the most underrated risk is, oh, the US is great. I want to do it now. I want to move fast. A lot of my also Eastern European clients that are in a very similar position to Canadians. They tend to move fast, they form an entity, they do all the paperwork without looking at the big picture, addressing the legal implications, the tax implications, the operational implications. But if they took a step back and looked at it from a big picture perspective, they can do the plan and move forward. That's probably what I would say.
Interesting. So the jumping into the deep end of the pool without looking where all the sharks are first is kind of what is the analogy.
Absolutely. And people are afraid that if they do something wrong, they're going to get hit with a letter from the IRS or some other federal agency. We work in this world. It's not an automatic liability. You can appeal. The U.S. It's litigious, as I mentioned earlier. So
And law is itself in the U.S. I've said this before regarding
yeah,
immigration law, but law in the United States is much more of an art than a science.
exactly. So as long as you have the right team around you, and you're obviously not committing like criminal violations, I mean, it's financial penalties, okay? And there's always ways to appeal them, but it's a lot more expensive to jump into the deep end of the pool and then swim out than to walk in from the other side on the other side calmly with control and understanding exactly what you're getting into. And that's what I always advise.
Just before you wrap up here, are there any trade policies that are like coming down the pipe that Canadian business owners should watch for? And if
Uh, I,
that you can think of, if there isn't, it's fine. I was just thinking if you're aware of anything that
mhm.
people should be thinking about.
Well, I was just in Washington, D.C. actually a couple of weeks ago for our firm retreat. Uh, I did not hear of anything, to my knowledge, that's in the pipeline. I wish. I know from an M&A perspective, I know that a lot of business owners are preparing to go to market, and a lot of buyers are having early conversation with a lot of big asset owners to build relationships and find a strategic fit. but nothing. I mean, you guys see it in the news. You Canadians see it in the news. The tariffs change on a weekly basis.
It
The
is a bit of
president can
a moving target.
the president can wait. I mean, he just reduced the tariffs on
A bunch of different food
coffee.
products. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's very difficult to predict. We have to pivot. And that's where having the right team around you is important to advise you. But we have to pivot at the time of announcement. The problem is what's been announced, uh, we don't know yet. That's the problem.
More shall be revealed. We'll leave it at
That's
that.
right. That's
So,
right.
for those watching here on the website, we've included all your contact information on the screen, but we know that there's a lot of people listening on Apple, on Spotify. They're driving in their cars. They can't see, how to get a hold of you. So what is the best way if someone wants to get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to contact you? Phone, email, how would you recommend?
So phone, so US, it's +1 obviously for Canadians. I don't know if there's a certain area code, and for anybody outside the US, +1 is the country code 954-991-5452.
Perfect.
Again, +1 954-991-5452. Or you can Google my name. So it's Michael, Michaelg, like George, Nesin. We optimize the website very well. It should come up first. And if you click on the website, all my full contact information is there. My email as well. My email, I'm not going to say it, but it's really long. It's mgneeson@dickinsonwright.com, but best to Google and get
It's
that email.
phonetic. It's phonetic, easy to
Yeah,
understand.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So,
Michael, I want to thank you. This has been fun. I know for the record, we had this conversation basically on the beach in Hollywood, Florida, about the idea of having you come on. I remember it perfectly well. And I'm glad you agreed to make time for this. And look forward to seeing you probably next couple of weeks when I'm back in Florida. So thanks a lot for making the time for us today.
all right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Wayne. Look forward to seeing you again.
Sooner than
Talk
later.
soon. That's right, man. Always welcome.
Michael Nielsen is a partner at Dixon Wright. He specializes in real estate and business law, and he has a focus on cross-border transaction and international clients. Thanks again, Michael. We will see you soon. I look forward to the bringing of the Three Questions podcast, and I hope you do find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive notification of when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we will see you soon.